Coming up on Plane Crazy Down Under, we catch up with the latest from global defence industry supplier Kongsberg.
It has the ability to recognise targets down to ship class, and it's been designed to operate in a very contested environment and has a lot of ability to make sure it actually gets through to the target.
And Mark Robinson from Frequentis brings us up to date with the latest in air traffic management technology.
What it's doing in very simple terms is replacing the view that a normal controller has out of the window with cameras and taking that camera feed to be controlled somewhere else.
It's all high tech this week as we get plane crazy.
Well, hi everyone and welcome back to the show. It's time to get plane crazy, of course, and it's time to talk aviation, and it's time to talk aviation with you, my good friend Grant McHerron. How are you, mate?
Hey, not bad, buddy. How are you doing?
Not bad. Getting used to these fancy radio intros. I think we'll get it right at one of these points in time.
Yeah, just in time to change tack and do something completely different.
Yes, well, we're not going to do anything different this week, Grant. In fact, we're going to go back to Avalon. There was such a great opportunity to get great content from that, and we're going to play some today that's actually quite relevant because if you follow defence and defence aviation, there's been a lot of talk about defence lately with, as we record this, the Defence Strategic Review that's come out, and I know that has a lot of impacts, probably more for the Army than anyone else in this one, but we're still keen to have a look at how it impacts aviation. But there's actually some interesting takeaways from the content that we're going to be presenting today, even though it was recorded prior to that announcement coming out.
That's right, mate. It's very topical. It's talking about long-range strike from Kongsberg. So we caught up with John Fry while at Avalon. The discussion covers NASAMS, which is their National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System. And we also went into the Naval Strike Missile and, of course, the Joint Strike Missile, which is designed for use on the Joint Strike Fighter. And, yeah, it was a really good chat. And it actually came out first on the Australian Defence Magazine podcast. So apologies if you follow both. You would have heard this one back in March during the event, but it's so good and it's very topical now. We're letting it out on PCDU as well.
Yeah, Grant, it actually is topical. Now that the DSR has come out, there is, it seems to us just from looking at it, some discussions we've had off here, that there looks to be more of a focus now on more long-range strike and, trying to hit any potential enemy before they are able to land on our shores. So, having a look at some of these long-range weapons, I mean, we're talking about dire circumstances and worst-case scenarios, but we have to be prepared for these things, let's face it. And, of course, there is a big aviation aspect for that. So that's part of the remote control type of stuff, if you want to look at it that way. But also, Grant, later in the show, we're going to be having a look at the subject of remote air traffic control towers.
That's right, mate. We've discussed it before in the original series of PCDU, but it's back again, and we chatted with Mark Robinson from Frequentis Australasia, and they're doing some more work with it. It's matured a lot since there was a trial back in Alice Springs from Adelaide. It's a good chat.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a couple of good chats in this one, so let's get to it.
John Fry, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Grant. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad today. It's been an incredible show. Are you finding that Avalon's going well for Kongsberg?
Yeah, I think it's been a great show. Definitely, I'd say it's been our best ever. Yep. There's a great buzz to Avalon this year. I think it's been 4 years is a long break, and I think everyone's happy to be back at an air show.
That's the truth. So, mate, let's start off with a quick overview of yourself. Let's talk about Kongsberg, the global company, and Kongsberg Defence Australia. Okay. So if you can give us those overviews of yourself and those.
Sure. So I joined Kongsberg in 2019 when, I suppose we established a landed company here, really back on the base of the NASAMS program. I joined Kongsberg from Raytheon, Australia. I spent 9 years there, working a number of programs across ground-based air defence and weapons, and I was the capture lead for the NASAMS program while I was there. Prior to that, I did a few years in consulting and other places, and I was actually 13 years in the Army as a ground-based air defence officer. So my background is air defence, so I'm quite passionate about the NASAMS capability of coming into service with the Army.
Well, we'll get to NASAMS in just a sec, because I'm really wanting to hear about that. But let's talk about Kongsberg and the Australian Army.
Yeah, so Kongsberg's a Norwegian defence company. So Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace is part of the Kongsberg Group. Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace is about 4,000 people globally. It's a growing business. bunch of technology areas, but I suppose probably pretty much well known for their work on precision strike missiles with our Naval Strike Missile, Joint Strike Missile, ground-based air defence with the NASAMS system. We do submarine combat systems, we do vehicle combat systems, and we do a lot of F-35 components as well, as Norway is a F-35 partner, and so we are essentially the Norwegian, I suppose, key partner for the production of F-35 components as well.
Fantastic. Okay, and here in Australia you're doing NASAMS, you've got a number of other products. But I think we should probably start with NASAMS.
Yeah.
You've mentioned it quite a bit here, and I think it's very special to you because it's right back where you started with Army again, but now you're supplying the latest technology.
Yeah, definitely. So NASAMS is a joint Raytheon Kongsberg product. It's been around for some time, and it's continued to evolve over the delivery to 13 different nations. And obviously the latest nation the system has been deployed in is actually in Ukraine, where it's operational today, after being provided to that country in November last year through the US government. The Australian program itself, Raytheon Australia is a prime contractor, so Kongsberg is the sub working with them, and from an Australian perspective, we are doing all the, Kongsberg Defence Australia is doing all our local hardware production here in country, and so we've actually transferred a bunch of technology on that program, including the building the fire distribution centres, which essentially is the heart and brains of the NASAMS capability. We're also producing the classroom trainers and doing, I suppose, final integration and assembly, final assembly and integration, I should say, of the canister launchers as well.
Okay, so National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System,
Correct.
NASAMS. So there's a lot going on. What's the kind of ballpark range of defence?
Everyone talks range.
I don't know. Well, it's good to start with that because that gives it. I know it's like, oh yeah, everyone talks range, but it gives everyone a perspective. Is this a close in? Is this a medium? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd actually say it's an intermediate range. So in terms of it's somewhere between short and medium.
Yeah.
So it uses the Australian configuration. Will use two types of missiles. So the AMRAAM, which is the Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile, and AIM-9X Block 2.
Okay.
So, which is the Sidewinder missile.
Yeah.
So essentially the Sidewinder is more your short-range missile. AMRAAM really pushes you out into the early part of the medium-range spectrum as well. So it's, and that's a complementary mix of IR and RF.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's actually the same weapons we're firing, obviously, Super Hornet or F-35 in an air-to-air role. We just fire them from the ground.
So do you have a booster to accelerate them up, or are the missiles sufficient straight off the ground?
No, they've obviously got their own rocket motor,
Yep.
and obviously the range of an AMRAAM launched from the ground is very different from the range of an AMRAAM launched off an aircraft. But no, there's no modification at all to those weapons. They can literally be taken off the wingtip of an aircraft, slid onto the NASAMS launcher rail and fired.
Okay, so I would imagine this would be, you've set up a forward base, you have a central command post within and a few batteries around the exterior perimeter, ready to fire and look after anything that's coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So the fire distribution centre itself is essentially the heart of the system, and once it's up and running, the radars, the electro-optic sensor and the launchers are all commanded, essentially controlled by two guys.
Yeah.
And you can network a bunch of these fire units together to provide really extended area cover. And it's a system that's been optimised for the defeat of fixed-wing aircraft, rotary-wing aircraft, but really very effective against cruise missiles. And that obviously been seeing that in Ukraine.
Yeah.
That's really about I suppose the automated decision support that's actually embedded in the C4 to provide operators with rapid engagement decisions. Because as we know, these missiles are designed to fly low, pop up late, and you only have a very short engagement window to engage them. So
exactly. And you mentioned a lot of Australian components that you're integrating here in Australia. So are you able to give like a rough ballpark of Australian industry involvement, that being the buzzword? And so how much of this is going to be sustained within Australia? How much needs to go back overseas to?
Yeah, so it's so from a fire distribution centre perspective, I'd say the vast majority of that has been built locally. There's some screens that have come off from offshore, and some of the I suppose some of the computers which come out of our specific to the system. But the vast majority of that system has been made locally, which I'm incredibly proud about.
Yeah, very.
And so we can pretty much know every nut, bolt and screw on those systems now. Every cable, etc., that's on that system has all been made locally. So it's a significant amount of our scope, especially on the hardware side, has all been sourced here. And I think we're in a position now with the sustainment contract. So Kongsberg Defence Australia now actually has a support contract with Frequentis Australia for providing that local support. So we're the front line for support and supported by our Norwegian parent. So that's a good position to be.
Yeah, and it also means it's faster turnaround on getting things sorted.
Absolutely.
It's much easier to get your accreditations sorted out because it was all made locally. People can come and look at it.
Definitely. If we have an issue, we can go down the road to Darramont or RAAF, who've done a bunch of our power supplies, and ILEX for our cables, and we can get repairs done quite quickly without having to go offshore. So
fantastic.
That's a genuine sovereign capability for support.
Yeah, no, that is good. That is very good. The last thing you want is to have to ship a whole unit off, get it repaired, bring it back, and what do you do in the meantime?
Exactly.
Especially if they're being barricaded, blockaded, etc.
Definitely.
So, okay, is there anything else you want to talk about NASAMS before we move on to the next?
No, just that obviously that program, we're a fair way through the production. So I think it's going to be a fairly exciting year for that program moving forward, and as we get closer to getting the kit into the hands of the soldiers and starting the training aspect. So I know that Raytheon and Kongsberg are working very hard on getting that capability up and running, which will, it's all looking very positive.
Yeah, a lot of effort in the training and making sure everyone knows what to do, and then on it goes.
It's a step-changing capability for Army, and but I think they're
very welcome.
They're going to love it.
Okay, so moving on, the next item is that we want to talk about is Strike Master. I grew up with Strike Masters in New Zealand, completely different. The old Blonties. So these are land-based, portable on a vehicle, take out a ship kind of missiles. Definitely medium and slightly long range when you hear about that. So can you tell us about the Strike Master?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose firstly, the Naval Strike Missile from Kongsberg can be deck launched from a ship, or it can be obviously vehicle launched as well. So we actually have a coastal defence system. We actually use the same C4 architecture that's in NASAMS.
If it works,
that's been adopted, obviously running different software, because we're about obviously maritime strike rather than ground-based air defence. But we've actually fielded that system into Poland, and the US Marine Corps are now also fielding a Naval Strike Missile-based land-based maritime strike capability also. So what Strike Master is really is it's a new launch platform for an existing system. So it uses a missile that we have that's actually coming into service now with the ADF through the Navy, and essentially it's a twin pack on the back of a Bushmaster. Again, from an engineering perspective, it's pretty much we're delivering a twin pack system on another program, and I think it's something that provides a strike option that's going to be available as an option to increase our strike capability in a very short time frame.
So it's very portable. So you could do the same kind of thing as some of the other portable systems. Get it out there in an aircraft, have it drive somewhere, launch, drive somewhere else very quickly, so it's not a target anywhere. Launch again, then get out.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's I think the real advantage of going on a landing craft. You can put that into an island or somewhere on the mainland, and with the range of the NSM of 250 kilometres, that's a significant amount of volume of waterway. And again, NSM is also a land attack weapon as well. So if you needed to, you can fly something over the land as well. But I think it's a great capability, and again, entirely consistent with what our partners are doing in the region.
And it's got its intelligence geared towards finding ship signatures and things like that, and identifying them in clutter, and because countermeasures on ships are huge now, so breaking through all that.
It's a very smart missile, is probably what I'll firstly say. It has the ability to recognise targets down to ship class, so you can tell this missile exactly what type of ship it needs to target. And it's been designed to operate in a very contested environment, and has a lot of ability to make sure it actually gets through to the target. So
and that's building on the Naval Strike Missile, the NSM, which is now also available inside an F-35's weapons bay.
Well, it is, but it's a slightly modified one. So it's actually It's called the Joint Strike Missile, but its evolution was out of the Naval Strike Missile.
Oh, okay, so it's actually the JSM that goes inside.
It's the JSM that goes into the F-35.
That's the J for Joint Strike Fighter.
That's right. And obviously we have the NSM coming in on the ships.
Yeah, okay.
But for the JSM, essentially they started out with the NSM, but they essentially had to, we need a different body shape to be able to fit
because it's got to fit inside that bay, and it's not huge.
It's not huge, and it's quite tight once they've taken all the available room. But they've designed a missile that does fit internally in there, and it's actually will be the only powered maritime strike, land attack, cruise missile available in the F-35A for internal carriage. So it's a pretty unique place to be in the market.
Yeah, because the Americans didn't think they needed something like that. So Kongsberg was building it and then got it set for Norway's F-35s, if I'm getting this right. And now I think the Americans are interested in it again?
Yeah, so I think, the Norwegians, they were obviously moved away. They were going all F-35 fleet. They wanted, again, a maritime strike weapon for their nation to operate in very complicated terrain against, to defeat, I suppose.
Lots of fjords,
it's a complicated environment they work in. Blue water, but groundwater. Operate in fjords, exactly,
lots
where
of
people can hide. So they wanted a very smart missile. They wanted to be able to carry that internally because you're going to have a stealth aircraft. You really want to keep it stealthy and keep your weapons tucked in. So that Norway actually developed the requirement and have funded the development. And I think now it's so unique in terms of availability, then all other F-35 nations are now looking at JSM, really. If you want to do maritime strike, then it should be the logical choice.
Well, congratulations on that. And if all goes well, I believe we'll hopefully see JSM on Australian F-35s. But
well, I hope so. So obviously Australia hasn't decided what they're going to do yet. The missile is still lost. The missile's ready. I suppose it's going through final qualification on the F-35A. That should be all sorted soon, and I think Norway and Japan have already selected JSM. I think there'll be a bunch of other countries that will be doing the same thing quite soon.
We can but hope. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say while we've got you here?
I think probably the only other thing we're super excited about the Naval Strike Missile acquisition for Navy. So obviously, government signed a contract at the end of last year with Kongsberg to provide Naval Strike Missiles on the Anzacs and the Hobart class missiles to replace Harpoon. That's an accelerated program. We'll have sort of capability on both of those platforms by the end of next year, which is a very aggressive time frame. And but we're super, I suppose, motivated, excited about getting that done because we know it's a great capability. It's going to significantly increase the surface capability of those two vessels. So I think it's a great thing. And like I said, similar to, I suppose, some of our other key partners, the US, UK, Canada have all selected that weapon as well for their vessels. So,
good.
All good.
Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time, and it's been very informative.
Awesome. No worries. Thank you very much.
Keeping up to date with the latest news is a huge part of our daily lives. Now you can have news on demand with the Australian Independent Radio News app. News and sport in your pocket whenever you want it. Wherever you are in the world, if you call Australia home, you can stay in touch with the Air News app. Download it now for news on the go.
This is Air News.
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 Australian Independent Radio News.
Look, let's be honest, Sarah, we've all got to eat.
That we do, Kevin. Food is such a big part of life, isn't it? And talking about food can lead us to all sorts of places and all sorts of people.
Yep. And every week on the Food Bites podcast, we catch up with someone who might be a TV celebrity, a high-profile sports star, a politician, could be anyone.
Yeah.
And we talk to them about food, their kitchen skills, or, sometimes lack of, life and love.
And Kevin, every week there's the Friday food poll.
Oh, yes. Now, that is Food Bites with Sarah Patterson and me, Kevin Hillier. You can find us wherever you find your favourite podcast, and, of course, every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock on the Ace Radio Network.
You're listening to Plane Crazy Down Under. Thanks so much for joining us. Grant, wasn't it really interesting to hear some of that, the capabilities? And, boy, weapons are getting smart, for better or worse. They're getting a lot smarter.
Yeah, they certainly are, mate. And, look, it's a sign of the times as technology merges into everywhere. So, yeah, smarter weapons, longer ranges, keep everyone further away. it's kind of important for an island nation. But also that what's important, mate, is, speaking of at a distance, is being able to set up air traffic control towers at remote locations, improve safety without having to have that overhead of people on site.
Yeah, it's kind of a matter of, in one case, keeping people away, but in this case, keeping people closer to population centres and still being able to, serve a very important air traffic control function. Let's head back to Avalon and have a listen to Mark Robinson from Frequentis.
Okay, Mark Robinson from Frequentis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Grant. Great to be here.
Excellent. Now, mate, we're standing here at Avalon and at the Frequentis stand. So let's start a quick background of yourself and Frequentis, an overview of what the organisation does.
Sure. So I'm English, obviously, by heritage. I came to Australia 25 years ago. Just had my 25th anniversary, in fact.
Wow, and the accent's still strong.
I'm afraid so. I'm an air traffic controller by trade. Mm-hmm. I was in the Royal Navy in the UK for 10 years as a controller, controlling on aircraft carriers and on shore bases. Yep. And in 1998, I came to Australia and joined the Australian Air Force, and I did another 11 years in the Air Force as a controller, finishing up as a wing commander and leaving in 2008. So I'm a controller by trade. Mm-hmm. Still very much that shapes a lot of the things that I do. I've been working in private industry now for about the last 15 years, and I've been with Frequentis for about 7. And my current role is I'm the head of sales and head of air traffic management for Frequentis in Australasia. And by Australasia, I mean Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and some other Pacific islands. So we have a fairly wide market.
That's a very, very large chunk of the earth right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you step us through Frequentis and also Frequentis Australasia?
Sure. So Frequentis is an Austrian headquartered company. We have about 3,000 people around the world. The headquarters is based in Vienna, and we address essentially 5 business markets. By far, our biggest market is the air traffic management world, and I'll talk more about that in a little while. But probably second to that is defence. And in defence, we look at air traffic control and air defence. And then the 3 other units that we look at is public transport, which is mostly railway systems, public safety, which tends to be the blue light organisations, so control rooms, for example, such as the Metropolitan Police in London, and finally maritime. And so that is things like coast guards, marine rescues, that sort of world. The key commonality between all those customers is the need for mission critical and safety critical equipment, whether that be information systems or in a lot of our cases communications. They have to be highly redundant, highly dependable, often 5 and 6 nines of reliability. So we have to meet those, and that's what we do across those business segments. In Australia, we've had a presence here since about 2004, and we've grown from about 4 or 5 guys back then to about 130 people now. So we have 4 offices, Brisbane, which is where the head office is, where I'm based, Sydney, Melbourne, and a small office in Perth. The reason we were at 130 people, we acquired a company called C4I, which is a small, medium defence sovereign provider of secure communications for the Defence Force. They also do a lot of export work out of Australia, which is very important, but also a lot of work for the Australian Defence Force. And when we acquired C4I, we brought about another 80 people on board, so that's why we're quite large now, a significant presence. But we're still growing, getting a lot of contracts, but going well so far.
Fantastic. So now that we've got the overview, let's talk about what's taking everyone's eyes here at the stand is 3 very large screens and a control panel, obviously for a virtual air traffic control or remote air traffic control. Are you able to talk about that product?
Sure. So remote tower or digital tower or virtual tower, those terms are kind of interchangeable. They're used by different people, but they all mean pretty much the same thing. And what it's doing in very simple terms is replacing the view that a normal controller has out of the window with cameras and taking that camera feed to be controlled somewhere else. The somewhere else can be downstairs on the same airfield in a portable building, an ATCO hut, something like that. Or, as we do in Germany, it can be 500 or 600 kilometres away in a completely different city. And to be quite honestly, the technical challenges doing it 500 kilometres away or doing it downstairs on the airfield are the same.
Okay.
So it's been growing. It started in Scandinavia at some very slow-moving airfields where they wanted to centralise the workforce, and it's very much grown from that. Our first customer was in Germany with the German ANSP DFS, who are quite a well-known company, and we now have 2 certified systems in Germany, that the regulator has stamped and said that's all safe. So we are providing air traffic control day in, day out at those places. And the first one has been since about 2018. So it's 5 years of operations where it's all done by cameras and not from a control tower.
That's fantastic. So this is real-world application. It's not, we're doing a prototype or a trial. Absolutely. It's in use.
Absolutely. So I think we have about 5 different systems certified around the world. We have one in Jersey in the Channel Islands, which is used as a contingency application. And by that I mean if they have to evacuate the tower for a fire or a terrorist threat, they can turn the cameras on and use those rather than having to somehow get the picture again. So that's in Jersey. We have one in Brazil and Argentina certified as well. So we have quite a range of actual in full operation.
Yeah, and that's obviously in quite a few different countries and countries that have very different infrastructure environments as well.
Absolutely, and the infrastructure is really important, especially when you think about the German case when you have to transport the video 500 or 600 kilometres away. You clearly have to have a very highly dependable network infrastructure in place, whether it be fibre, tends to be the preferred method of communication, with a redundant path, of course, because as anyone who works in an airfield knows, there's always work going on and there's always a backhoe digging stuff up. So it's not unusual for things to get broken. So we have to have the diverse paths to meet all the normal requirements for any aviation equipment.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all your DO 178, 278, all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. Software assurance is the way we develop it is all the same. We have to show the artifacts, how we've done that, which is an interesting point because a lot of people ask about artificial intelligence and how that may come into this. And it's got a place. Some of the problems with AI is it's very hard to follow that software assurance path, how you've got to making the decision. So that will come for sure. I think we just need to introduce those things a little gradually.
Yeah, it'll take like a common base AI module that has gone through the rigmarole of testing that you then build on. The certification. So in Europe, South America, UK area, that kind of thing. How about here in Australia or in the Asia Pacific area? Are you getting many nibbles for this?
So there's Airservices, the ANSP here, have been looking at digital towers for probably about 10 or 11 years now. They did a trial between Alice Springs and Adelaide in around 2010-11, which it was very early days for the technology, so there was a number of reasons that didn't go on. So they've gone back to it, they've given it a little bit more time for the technology to mature. And they've gone to market over the last couple of years again for that. We were lucky enough to be the preferred supplier for Airservices, and we are under contract now to provide that at 2 locations in Australia. And that project's just started, and that will be rolling out over the next 2 or 3 years. And hopefully that will be the first 2 of a number of places. Airservices is very open to say that there are several of their towers which are getting quite old, which could be candidates to be replaced with this technology. So we'll see how that goes in the next few years.
Plus, there's a number of locations that could really do with a tower, but getting people out to those locations, manning them, building it, all that is a pain in the butt.
Absolutely, and there are certain locations which we see the number of movements increasing rapidly. And I know that CASA looks at these very carefully to make sure the operations are still safe. One of the things that may happen is that Airservices are asked to provide a service. So this may be, this technology may be something which can help with that.
Are you getting much interest from Defence for this, given that they have their own areas, towers, all that kind of thing?
They do. One of the things we're looking at and talking to Defence about is the deployable or the expeditionary aspect of this. We have some contracts with the US Department of Defence for a couple of fixed and a couple of deployable versions for this. So that's a very good reference, if you like, that the US military put their trust in us to do that. Fantastic. So we're having some ongoing discussions with the Air Force about how this might work in a deployable situation. It certainly would bring some benefits to them. I spent some time in the Middle East in the early 2000s when the Air Force was providing tower services in Baghdad. And I think if some of this technology had been around, then it might have been used. To try and get the controllers out of harm's way, that would have been a good thing, I think. So.
Yeah, so they're not so obvious being up the tower, especially some of the temporary ones that are scissor lifts. Yeah. Pretty obvious there. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us while we're here?
No, I think it's great to be back at Avalon. This is the first time we've been here for 4 years, obviously, because of COVID and a number of things. We've got our sister company C4I here, who are, as I mentioned before, a very important defence supplier. So, no, we're just delighted to be here and see people and talk face to face.
Cool. Fantastic. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Okay, pleasure.
And thanks to Mark for his time there. Really interesting stuff, both from the civil and the defence side. And Grant, Mark's actually a very, very interesting character in himself when you consider the rather extensive history that he's had.
That's certainly the case, mate, and that history is being applied very well in his current role. So I'm looking forward to seeing technology like this allowing us to have improved safety at regional locations. There's a lot of airports around that could do with an air traffic control tower, but it's just too expensive to establish and maintain and staff them. So this could be the opportunity we need.
Well, the interesting thing there is, Grant, that you could still staff those towers, but have those staff somewhere closer to a population centre where presumably most staff would want to be. If people think back to our original series and our good friend ATC Ben, an air traffic controller, now he works locally here in Melbourne these days, but he actually did a stint way out in Karratha, I think it was actually.
Yep, that's right.
Now, I mean, I think I'm probably putting words in his mouth, but I think Ben actually enjoyed that experience. However, if you think about Airservices Australia's ability to be able to recruit people to work in those locations, or at least to work at those locations, you know, there's some real advantages here, I think, in looking at this as a solution.
Oh, it certainly is, mate. And we've already got the situation now where, speaking of ATC Ben, he's one of the controllers working Adelaide approach departure from Melbourne. So we're already doing it in a way.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So some really good high-tech stuff there, as our good voiceover guy Terry Daniel said at the start there. And it's always good to talk about advances in technology, and particularly this one where hopefully it wouldn't impact, you know, staffing, hopefully, too badly. So I'm pretty impressed with that. I always like a bit of technology, Grant.
Technology that augments, not replaces entirely.
Yeah, it's a bit like our studio here where it sounds like we're in the same studio, and maybe we are. People will just never know.
Yay, technology. And I think on that point, we've probably hit a spot where we should wrap up this episode.
We certainly would, folks. And if you'd like to get in contact with us just to say hello, or, of course, to offer us any story suggestions or anything like that, contact at planecrazydownunder.com is where you go for that. And, of course, Grant, you can also find us all over social media because, you know, social media, we just love it, sort of.
Yeah, we'll get there, mate. We'll figure out the social media. But meanwhile, the old school media works pretty well. If you're enjoying this, please tell a friend about us so they too can enjoy some of the Down Under madness.
Absolutely. In fact, you know, even if they're not your friend, tell them anyway. You know, we don't care. We just want people listening. But anyway, we've got lots of great stories and great people to talk to coming up in future episodes. So we'll be looking forward to presenting those to you in the coming weeks and months. Until then, Steve Vischer on behalf of Grant McHerron, wishing you all very safe flying, folks, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Find show notes for this episode along with our contact details and a full back catalogue of shows at planecrazydownunder.com. Drop us a line anytime with feedback, story suggestions or advertising inquiries. We'd love to hear from you. Title music is You Name It by Brian Simpson. Plane Crazy Down Under is a Southern Skies media production.
Southern Skies Media.